Good morning. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. Actually, it's afternoon, sorry folks. And I have in my studio today Harry Welty, who is running for the school district in which district now, Harry, is it?
It's the second district, Marcia.
Second district, okay? And Harry should be a familiar figure to many of you because Harry has been on the school board before. And I just welcome him here and look forward to having him tell you why is he running for the second district on 709 School District. Okay, Harry, what would you like to tell the folks?
Well, Marcy, I was bumped off the school board 2 years ago in an election which a lot of people turned out to vote. But I've decided that I'm not quite finished with the school board. And I didn't really have a very satisfying 4 years on that school board because of various difficulties with various members of the board, which I'm kind of intrigued to point out apparently have continued on even without me for the past 2 years. So we've gotten some odd headlines. School board member, one of them who defeated me 2 years ago, has had enough and he's hung up and resigned. I believe that the right people on the school board and a new superintendent of schools that we are going to be hiring over the course of the next few months or a year, might see us make some headway and changes to the positive. The chief difficulty that we have is financial. We passed a red plan which basically diverted 100 teachers, $10 million every year away from the classroom to pay off new buildings. And any school board is going to have a challenge trying to address that. And I'm ready for that challenge.
Well, Harry, I appreciate your rerunning again. I know what a challenge it is. And I want to remind the folks that we're going to be paying down that red plan for another 10, 20 years or more. We have schools that are sitting empty that were being promised to us to pay down this indebtedness. And yet one that is rotting, the old Central High School, which has been a major point in conversations I've had with people when we start talking about schools, is there it sits when it could have been sold to an alternative educational system. And they're not going to go away. So why we didn't sell it is because of a board policy, and we had people on that board policy that were too short-sighted and would not sell it to an alternative. Now it's rotting, and we're putting out how much money per year to maintain the site?
Well, for the last 10 years, it's been roughly $176,000, 2 teachers a year to heat and maintain a building that we probably are not maintaining very well.
And we took $170,000 just recently was voted on for the 7 members to take $170,000 out of the classroom again, which is two teachers, and stick it on the financial debt that we're having to pay down. And so I don't see too much right thinking on this board right now. And you, the voters, have got to realize if you want this to stop, you have to go for change. And I know that Harry is very financially solid in his thinking, and I'd like him to explain what he would like to see done if he was placed on the school board on the November 5th ballot.
Well, I will not take office until January.
That's correct.
We will have a new superintendent starting sometime the summer following the close of the school year this year or next year. What I am hoping is that we have a school board composed of people who aren't too tied in with the past, who are not part of kind of a small group that's always sort of controlled things. We are suffering death by 1,000 cuts, and it may not be a death, but we've got to make sure that we turn the district around, and it's going to take 1,000 bandages. I believe the community should step in. Our teachers are overwhelmed. I think their morale is, I think it's been under stress since the Red Plan began. I just like openness, and the perennial complaint for the last 10 years of this administration of school board is that they're very close to the breast. They don't share information, and that has been part of the headlines in the News Tribune for the past 7, 8, 9, 10 days, and a fairly harsh editorial about the leadership of the district. That's one of the things that got me in touch with the old school board is I wanted more information. I think as a member of the public, I was elected to provide the public with information. I have to explain why things are the way they are. And I trust the public, once they understand where we stand, to be pulling for the schools because it's our children involved, our city's future.
And we already know that Art Johnston won a lawsuit this past year over the district because they refused to give him information that's covered by the Minnesota State Data Practices Act. So it took an attorney on his part to tell the school district, you are withholding evidence that he has a right to have. And I understand that after monitoring the district for 10 and a quarter years, finally giving up because I was just too tired anymore to do it. And yet I still kept a little bit of an eye on it. And so we have more cover-up and more, I would say, corruption in this district. If it were peeled back far enough, we would find that many people would just be totally taken aback by what went on during the reconstruction phase headed by Johnson Controls and Dixon, and now Gronseth has carried on his legacy. Recently, there was a little bit of a furor over the current assistant superintendent having some DWIs and whatnot that the other board members were not made aware of. And you were at this meeting just recently. So do you want to just be a little bit more explicit about that since I wasn't there?
Well, I guess since I was controversial because I always seem to be asking for information that the rest of the school board of my era didn't want to provide me, I guess I'm not surprised that the current school board was put in a position of hiring and okaying somebody who had a number of DWIs and difficulties with the law because they weren't told. I believe they should have been. The News Tribune, which doesn't always agree with me on things, they wrote a very pointed editorial making that point themselves not long ago. As to whether the assistant principal is the superintendent is the man for the job, I'm not in a position to say. Argument's been made for his case, but the issue is the one of hiding information.
Right.
And about the time this all took place, one of the two candidates who defeated me 2 years ago, Josh Gorham, nice young man, serious-minded, he just quit. And I'm sure that controversy and some of the leadership he's had to put up with was a part of it. And to me, I keep thinking about the number of people who thought that Art Johnson and I caused problems. Well, those problems that are going on now have taken place without Art Johnson or me on the board. Something is wrong, rotten in the state of Denmark. I don't think it's corruption as such, although I think Johnson Controls got a very good deal. It's time to clean it up. Let's be honest with people, do what we can. And I think that we can turn the road and turn the corner and make things better.
Well, we certainly have to do something for the sake of our children and to stop bilking the community for cover-ups and mismanagement of funds and whatever else they are doing because we can't get the evidence on them. It needs to be investigated, and I think it needs to go way back and start finding out where 20 million went to Johnson Controls without anybody really knowing that it actually happened. And, there's a lot that needs to be done. But, okay, so let's look at the future here. What goal would you say you want to really focus on having been elected in November? What goal would you focus on first?
Well, I've never met a school board member who didn't think kids were the first first and really only priority for a school board member. We currently have two ends of town that are not equal. And speaking about the high schools, one high school is 40% of our student population, and the other one is 60%. And the one that's got 40% out west also has a higher proportion of kids with greater needs than a somewhat more prosperous student body in the eastern end of town. And while I am very pleased, Alana Oswald talked the board into making sure that compensatory education, which are supposed to address those needs, is spent where the kids generate it. But we need to do more than that, because we have to have a school district, or we have to aim for a school district in which the two ends of towns distrust one another. And I'm running for an eastern district slot. I don't believe the people out east are happy that the western end of town is having undue difficulties. And we need the people out east to be pulling for the people in Denfeld and make sure that their children are treated fairly in our schools.
Many people will not understand what compensatory education funds are, so if you could explain that to us.
If I could, very briefly, compensate comes from the word compensate. You compensate people who have been harmed in some way or maybe have some difficulties to try to equalize things. The state has a little pot of money, and it's not a huge pot. It's called compensatory education. Every school district that has kids who are in extra need gets some portion of it. The idea is that this will compensate for some of the difficulties they bring with them to school. And when it's spent on kids who don't have those difficulties, it's an affront to my sensibility.
Well, and I was still filming when that issue came up, and the parents and teachers and whatnot came to the district meeting and the education committee meeting, and they wanted some action. So it took, probably 3 years to finally make Gronseth realize that just because the law says you may put the funds, instead of you shall put the funds, he was using the may so he could get around that, and it was going out east instead of going out west. I really think that was a deliberate move on his part, and I have seen him manipulate in other ways as well, and we won't get into all of that. But I'm glad to hear that it's finally going where it needs to go, because you do have a greater population of homeless kids out there and lower income families, and why should they not have the quality of education that is being given to the students out east? It is a totally unfair situation.
Absolutely. And while I don't want to be a great defender of the superintendent, I think the superintendent would say, and he would be right in saying this, if he didn't make a change, he did not have a school board that was encouraging him to make a change. Now, was he welcoming the change when it came? I don't know for sure. I know it took a while, longer than I would have liked, for that compensatory education to be spent fairly, but it was the board who you have to saddle with the responsibility for how that money was spent in the past.
Except if you have a man that is in charge, such as the superintendent of schools. He knows better, and he should have done the right thing without having to have the board force him to do it. I'm sorry, I disagree with you on that one, Harry, but a person that has integrity, honesty, and the best interest of all the people in mind should be doing the right thing without having to be pushed into it. So,
well, I will just add one more thing. The money was spent in a legal way.
I understand
was it
that.
The right way?
No.
No,
Yeah, I
but
understand
it
that.
was the legal way, so
Yeah.
bear that in mind.
I understand that part of it. The legal way, I understand that. Okay, so Harry, I'm going to have you give the boundaries of the second district, because some people just go to the polls and they aren't sure who they're voting for sometimes, just because the newspaper said you should do this. Not everybody thinks that way.
Yes.
Many people, but not everybody. So let's hear the boundaries of the second district, 709 school district.
Well, if you look at it on the map and draw an outline of it, it looks kind of like a duck with a very big head. Down on the lakeside, down below the hill, it includes most of the Congdon school district, or school attendance area, up to about 35 4th Avenue East. And it goes to about 6th Avenue East down below the hill. Then as you're going up the hill, it narrows. It includes my precinct, which is the area that goes to about Wallace Avenue, and it goes to about 12th Avenue East, and includes the area of the colleges up to Arrowhead Road, between Woodland and Arrowhead and Rice Lake Road.
Are you out door knocking and meeting people that agree with your view, or are you getting it through your blog, or how is it that you're getting a feel of what the people want?
I got a terrible case of plantar fasciitis, which means your foot is really, really sore. I couldn't walk on it. Yes.
Yes, I know about it.
Because I was my pedometer showed me walking 35 steps a day for the month of August until I just simply couldn't walk anymore. I've decided that this time I want to spend a little more time communicating through the blog that I have, because anybody can go to the blog at their leisure, don't have to worry about me knocking on their door during dinner time and saying, please, let me just eat my dinner in peace. So I've done that. I've never made a secret of how I feel about things. I've expended a great many words on the school district's educational issues and other things besides. So I'm counting on that. I'm also in the process of spending money to send out a letter that explains what I'm all about to hopefully all the people in my district, if I can scratch up enough donations. So that's my method of communicating. Plus, you can't forget the fact that I'm the runningest politician in the city of Duluth. This is about my 17th attempt at a public office, and so far the voters have given me 3 4-year terms on the school board. This would be my 4th, should I succeed.
Well, we can't depend on that, because we can't depend on what we have out there. Voting, and having been an election judge for many, many years, a lot of people just don't get out and vote, and so that is something that you don't know until the day of. And
that's true.
That's something you can't depend on.
But as with business world, where we say caveat emptor, the Latin for buyer beware, voters beware too.
Oh, exactly. You need to know before you go, as far as I'm concerned. That's my slogan. You know before you go. Okay, Harry, what are some of the other caveats that you have been chewing on and making your decision that you wanted to run?
Tough, leathery caveats. Well, I've already mentioned the fact that we've got to find some way of making sure that our kids get the very best education with far too few dollars and too few teachers. I know we have a community that would be, a lot of community members would like to step up and help out in that regard. I've already talked about the inequality between better off eastern and the less well off western parts of the town. I'm somebody who really believes that we muzzle teachers all the time. We've had so many difficulties over the last 10 or 12, about 20 years, 25 years with teacher tests or student test scores not being satisfactory. And our solution is always comes down from the Congress or the legislature. I think that our teachers ought to be freed up from so many of the restraints that our administration is forced to lay on them. I don't know quite how to achieve that, but I do believe we've got to find some way that teachers don't feel like they just constantly have to fill out reams and reams of paperwork instead of figuring out what they're going to do to get their kids interested in material that they need to learn if they're going to be competent, healthy, and happy citizens of this country.
Well, and there has been such a control over teachers. I'm appalled when I talk to retired teachers and hear what they have to do in the classroom and what they have to take home with them at night. I mean, I know teachers have taken papers home to correct for many, many years, but they're filling out more reports than they're actually getting a chance to take care of their students' work and focus on the students. And we don't have as many people within the classrooms anymore as we used to have either, because they can't afford to hire the, whatever you call them, helpers, and they have many different titles. And so that's a problem. And I do remember the sell job of the red plan. We are going to have lower classroom sizes, and that's anything but the truth. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, our classroom sizes are bigger, and that was one of the things that was suggested would happen with the red plan. Our class sizes would be smaller. The rooms are bigger, but they're every bit as crowded, if not more crowded. Another great travesty of the red plan was we were told we were going to get education for the 21st century. We were going to get whiteboards. Well, as I was leaving the school board 2 years ago, we were taking all the whiteboards, these wonderful interactive white screen computers, out of the classroom because they were already beginning to become old, and they're expensive. And so the 21st century left our classrooms, along with more teachers, more students getting crowded in. So that's one of those cuts that we have to find some way of doing something about.
Well, I take community education classes from time to time. Walked into a classroom several years ago that had never had a classroom in it. And I walked around the school to find out where there were teachers in rooms, and there were rooms that were never used, with a 10 to 4, I can't remember what Art Johnston said, but they're we'll go $8,000 to $12,000 per whiteboard with all its technology, and it's obsolete, and they're pulling it out. Makes me want to get on the warpath one more time against the school district, but that is just insane. I mean, all that money for nothing, and then some of them never were used. It's just pitiful. It's pitiful.
Well, I am accused by people who usually don't come to my face, but I just know this is out there, that I told you so, and I won't let go of the past. Well, Santayana, the great philosopher, had a saying that covers that. He said, those who do not know the past are condemned to repeat it. So. I saw a wonderful word that spins it around differently in the African American Methodist Episcopal Church. St. Mark's is having a get together, and they have a word from Ghana, Sokofa. I wish I remember what it was, but they described it as valuing the past to help you figure a way into the future. And that's a much more positive way. I'm a bit of a scold about what happened in the past, but the real issue, and people are right, is what we do with what we have to make sure our kids are treated well. That's a challenge, and I think with a new school board and a new superintendent, we can face those difficulties and march into the future for our kids' betterment.
Well, I could say this, and I've said it before. I went to Denfeld back in 1965. I graduated out of a class that was 484 kids, and the subsequent classes were almost equal. So we had about 1,500 kids in Denfeld at half the size it is now. And I'm going to guess at the absolute outset, maybe 5% of our kids were incompetent. Today, the figure I heard this morning, and this is kind of statewide, is 27% of our kids are literate by the time they get out of school. Sure, we give them a piece of paper that says they graduated, but are they capable of going out there and getting a job that is going to sustain their lifestyle, or can they even get a job in the first place? But so many of the jobs that are available, and there are many out there that are hiring every place I go. You see a sign looking for workers, whatever, and yet they're functionally illiterate. And one of the fellows that ran for the school board in Loeffler Kemp's position last time, he used to be a prison official, and he said it's the school to prison pipeline, and I had heard it. I actually had him explain it, and it just made my hair stand on end. I didn't go to college, but I am functionally literate, and I have done many things in my life, much of it self-taught. And that is not happening today. We are seeing these kids on the streets doing drugs, crime of other kinds, and in prison at early ages. And it just appalls me that our school system is a lot of it at fault because of many of the regulations that have come down from the federal government, the state government. It ties the hands of the teachers in so many ways. It's time to stop it, and I do hope that you will focus on that after the November election and you get a chance to be seated in January. I really hope you'll focus on that because that's crucial for our nation.
I'll do my best.
So, well, I appreciate you coming in today, Harry, and it's been great talking to you once again, and wish you the best.
You were easy on me. Thanks.
November 5th, you have a choice. You need to take the time, mark it on your calendar, put it on your phone to remind you. You need to get out and vote on November 5th. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. Bye now.